In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 20, Andrew and Jerry Save Baby Formula. I am Andrew Langer.
Jerry Rogers.
And we are happy to be with you today. There's so much to talking about. It's a guestless show because we have so much to talk about. And I kind of like that we're taking this tactic when there is so much going on. Jerry and I sit down and have the opportunity to talk. Want to thank you all, as always, for your continued listenership. We're about to hit another major milestone in the number of downloads we've had. So thank you for that. Please tell your friends, tell your family members, tell your coworkers, tell your enemies, frankly, about the podcast. Leave a review on wherever you're listening, wherever you're downloading, or if you're watching on Rumble or Facebook, please do that. But you know something, Jerry, let's get to it. Let's go to our opening segment. That's our Ripped from the Headlines.
Ripped from the Headlines.
So lots to talk about. I watched this. I've been following the food processing story and actually posed a question to some journalists that I know because I wasn't aware if this was a real thing or not. And folks have told me that as far as food processing plants and fires and accidents going, that there is no indication that things are any different. But this baby formula story is massive. And you and I started chatting about it yesterday. Thankfully, you and I are both well beyond the stage with our families where we need to buy baby formula. But this is a not only is it a huge issue, but it is a really scary issue, Jerry. And have you talked to Erica about this? I mean, has she given you any thoughts?
I tell you what I've done, and even on my radio show, I've called out to all lactating men to do their best to help in this shortage.
Channeling your inner Robert De Niro from Meet the Parents.
And of course,
milk me.
we have this wonderful redefinition of what a man and what a woman is. And so therefore, all these men who lactate should now step up. No, I mean, look, here's the thing. There's a very simple reason for this. In addition to the context, right? The context is inflation, an economy that's going in the wrong direction, but also a public health community that is focused on minors when they should be focused on majors. Yeah. The reason for this shortage is because of the FDA.
Well, and this is what gets into it. It's funny because we talk about, when you and I talk about the commodity, the economics of commodities, right? And we talked about it in terms of healthcare, because healthcare, like other products, is a commodity in a marketplace. And one of the things that I've talked about is one of the problems with an approach where you increase demand for a good is that with healthcare, you can't increase supply readily. We have a limited number of doctors and nurses and physicians assistants. And one of the examples I used to use in terms of talking about healthcare was I talked about Costco and the Costco approach to things and how you have the sort of the shared cost and buying power. And I used to say, with Costco, if Costco runs out of toilet paper, all they need to do is go to the manufacturers of toilet paper and say, hey, get us more toilet paper. But in this instance, right, we have, let's say, a steady demand. I don't think demand has gone up or down for formula per se, but we have the most major manufacturing plant in a formula manufacturing plant in America shut down. We cannot go to, and this is where it demonstrates the abject failure of this administration, right? This administration, when they knew they were shutting down this Abbott baby formula plant,
right?
This administration should have been on top of, right? We know,
right?
They should have been on top. We know what the supply of baby formula is in the marketplace. We know that there are other places that they could go theoretically to get it, whether it's abroad or what have you. But at the very least, once they took the step of taking this plant offline for months, right? Because the whistleblower complaint happened in the fall. They took the plant offline, sometime in the early winter?
Right.
Right. And it's been offline. So it's now, let's say 6 months, half a year.
But again, this is what happens. You have a government that makes decisions and then doesn't understand the consequences of its decisions. Look,
yes,
this is just another example of that. Just recently this morning, there's news that Senator Elizabeth Warren has dropped a bill that would require companies to disclose their rationale for their pricing. And I'm thinking to myself, this is just little bits of insanity, right? Because number one is the thought police. Number two, how do you measure this? But number three, she doesn't understand the chilling effect this will have on prices.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Right.
This is and with the FDA and with the baby formula, we've been so focused on wrong things, on Build Back Better, which we're not, on infrastructure. Do you realize, Andrew? Again, instead of focusing on this formula issue, which this administration could have done something about, instead they're passing infrastructure legislation that's going to pour in better than $1 billion of infrastructure at a time when we have supply chain issues, labor issues, pricing issues, inflation issues. This is the very worst time to be doing infrastructure. But instead, again,
because they're so desperate for good news. They're desperate for some kind of a win. Yeah, and they're desperate to
And I'll be I'll end here and just be snarky for a second. But since the leak, and by the way, we might get a decision on Roe v. Wade, i.e. the Dobbs decision on Monday.
Yeah.
This administration, the Democrats, the mainstream media, the Washington Post, and all the rest of them are so keen on killing as many unborn children as possible that now their decisions, their lack of coverage, their regulatory burdens are now going to be starving children post-birth.
Well, and this gets into
don't get them in the womb. We're going to get them. We're going to get them after they're born.
I'm going to play Congresswoman Katie Porter's statement sort of about this, because it really encapsulates this in a second. But I want to be really clear about something. When we talk about this, we talk about this issue. One of the ways to sort of think about it and look at it is imagine the hue and cry from the Democrats were this to have happened under Donald Trump's watch, right? If Donald Trump had been president when there was this nationwide baby formula crisis, it probably would have been, listen, it's going to sound snarky, but I think they would have been calling for impeachment for this or something. But at the very least, they would have been screaming bloody murder for how the president and the Republicans don't care about the kids. They don't care about babies in America. They would say, oh, they want to save all these babies, but then they don't want to feed the babies. This is just incompetence from a guy who shouldn't be in office. And at the same time, I would push back and say, if Donald Trump were president today, he would be clearing the regulatory baffles, right? He would be trying to find ways to bring in baby formula from overseas, but also at the same time, right? You think about what we did in Operation Warp Speed. He would have had his administration, and I'll talk about the Democratic reaction on this in a second. He would have had the regulatory agencies responsible for sitting on this. He would have gone to them and said, no, enough is enough already.
Right.
Get this plant opened up
now. And for our listeners who say, well, that would never happen, it did happen.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying is look at Operation Warp Speed.
Exactly right.
Look at what they were able to do there. And the reality, of course, is then, of course, the Democratic reaction would be, well, you can't trust the baby formula because they're short chain. They would have pulled the playbook exactly what they did with regards to fomenting distrust in the vaccine. They would have done in this regard. Go ahead.
You're right. But again, short of all of that, why not get the plant up and running again?
100%.
You've had months and months and months and months, and it's still not up and running. And again,
hold on.
Go ahead.
Keep talking.
This just demonstrates clearly. There was a time in my life where I understood that those who are more progressive, more liberal than me would choose to vote for Democrats because they wanted higher taxes, because they wanted a more robust safety net. They wanted to vote for Democrats because they did not like the military industrial complex, so to speak. There were reasons to support Democrats.
Yes,
I don't get that any longer, because everything this administration is doing, news yesterday that sales and leases for oil and energy production in Alaska were canceled.
Let's get to that in a second, because that's absolutely yes.
And my point is that because the baby formula issue is just a microcosm of the incompetence and the ideological religiosity of Democrats and why they can't be trusted to govern.
And by the way, predicated on a big lie, right? Because as we talk about this, they think that the abortion issue, and there was some polling out of Harvard of all places to talk about the abortion issue. They think the abortion issue is going to win them votes come fall. And so they're going to milk it for all it's worth. And again, it's predicated on a lie. This decision comes out on Monday, right? Or it comes out in June. Whenever this decision comes out, it does not mean the end of abortion in America. It doesn't even mean the end of, hold on. It doesn't even mean the end of abortion in states that are more restrictive on abortion. What it does mean is that in a state like Mississippi, which is what this decision focuses on, is that they're able to set a certain standard for when they're going to restrict abortion. It means that the other states will have different options. Let me go here, speaking of which, because we've opened up the door. Here is Congresswoman Katie Porter talking about, and yes, this is from RNC Research, talking about Bidenflation and the need for abortion.
President Biden has said that inflation is the number one priority for the Biden White House to try to get under control right now. As you're out there in California talking to constituents during this re-election year for Congress, how does inflation compare to this newly important, in the sense of the Supreme Court decision pending, abortion issue? How do those two issues compare?
Well, I don't think they compare. I think they actually reinforce each other. So the fact that things like inflation can happen and it can become more expensive to feed your kids and to fuel your car is exactly why people need to be able to be in charge of how many mouths they're going to have to feed. So I think the fact that we're seeing this jump in expenses, that we're seeing people having to pay more in the grocery store, pay more at the pump, pay more for housing, is a reason that people are saying, I need to be able to make my own decisions about when and if to start a family. So I don't think we're going to see them. I don't think it's like about comparing them or contrasting them. I think they reinforce for people just how big of a responsibility it is to take.
So it's expensive to have a child. So kill your child when it's in its most vulnerable state. Well, listen, Andrew.
Hold on. Listen, I'm going to say this, Jerry. I applaud Katie Porter for her honesty. Thank you.
No, I don't. Her honesty. She's grotesque.
No, she is grotesque. But my point is, she said the quiet part out loud. This is like Joe Biden saying about aborting kids.
But here's what I think. I think that this is now plain. The idea of killing children, defenseless children, is the quiet part. They're shouting it at us. Just 2 days ago, the Senate voted on what they call codifying Roe, but it wouldn't. It would make abortion legal and paid for by taxpayers from the moment of fertilization until the moment of birth. That is radical. That is ugly. That is Nazism, is what it is. It's child sacrifice.
And again, Jerry, it is the predication of part of this big lie, right? Again, right? Because Roe, and for those of you who missed out, we had a good conversation with Carrie Severino about this. Roe, first of all, Roe was really about doctors and patients, and not about or doctors and services. But the point is that, Roe was not a decision that declared that you can have an abortion at any time, anywhere, and that it would be funded by taxpayers. So this bill that went through the Senate last week to codify Roe was not doing so. Right. It is like, right. It's like these examples we talk about where, you have a bill that says that the title is one thing, but it does directly the opposite.
Right.
Let's save all, like, or they could call this the Save the Children bill,
or the Affordable Care Act.
Perfect, good example. Thank you. And so so that is yet another one of these big lies. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm at my wit's end when it comes to this issue, because the Democrats are so extreme on this. We're no better. I'm sorry, and it's the truth. We're no better than the Aztecs and the Incas sacrificing children for right. Take her reasoning. Yeah. Well, for economics, because it's expensive, because of inflation, we have to destroy the tiny human in my womb. Well, the Aztecs and the Incas sacrificed children, what? For good crops, essentially because of economic reasons. And we're doing this is 2022, and we are progressively advancing backwards towards a barbarism. And again, I don't have any patience for anyone who would take a different position on this issue. So, again, go ahead. Again, the keep your rosaries off my ovaries argument, and it goes back to in 1857, if you don't, and this was Dred Scott more or less said the 1837. The John C. Calhoun slavery as a positive good speech on the floor of the Senate.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially, that Supreme Court decision plus John C. Calhoun's argument was, okay, if you don't like slavery, if you don't like owning a slave, well, then don't
have one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same moral reasoning.
Yeah.
Or lack of immoral reasoning.
Well, and it's like folks who sort of compare this issue to the gun issue, which is just so stupid. On its face, and I'm going to preface this because I want to play this Bill Maher clip here, Jerry.
Yeah.
So I am not saying this to idolize Bill Maher. I am. The guy I want to be. Now I got to be really.
No. So what Andrew's doing? What Andrew's doing here is that he is he's prepping for our next segment because
all I am saying is. Even Bill Maher,
yes. Even Joe Rogan, even Elon Musk.
Yes, that's the point. It's a whataboutism thing. Let me play this. So this is last week's not politically incorrect.
Oh, by the way, before you play it, Paul Begala is here.
Yeah.
Now he has someone who has also progressed in the wrong direction. He was once a proudly pro-life Democrat.
Yes.
And as was the who's the Catholic senator from Virginia who ran on the vice president's ticket?
Oh, Tim Kaine.
Tim Kaine was once a proudly pro-life Democrat. Casey, Pennsylvania Democrat, once proudly. The Democratic Party has, again, they have taken the knee when it comes to abortion extremism.
No greater disappointment than the former head of the RNC and a former good friend to me. Now on MSNBC, ardently pro-life, almost became a priest, going the wrong way on this issue. I'm not going to mention his name. So here we are, the Bill Maher show last week.
All right, so people hate talking about abortion, so let's do it. I don't want to do it, but it's the big issue, and we got to do it, and this is what happened. And, it's interesting because until this memo was leaked and we found out that now, unless something very unforeseen happens, the Supreme Court is going to undo Roe versus Wade after 49 years, we haven't really been focusing on it. Or maybe I'm projecting. I guess I haven't been enough because I learned things this week, because this put it on the front page, that are pretty basic things that I did not know about abortion. Like in Europe, the modern countries of Europe, way more restrictive than we are, or what they're even proposing. If you are pro-choice, you would like it a lot less in Germany and Italy and France and Spain and Switzerland. Did you know that? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
That's right. Okay. I learned most people who are pro-life are women. Did not know that.
Almost, by the way, Bill Maher almost channeling Johnny Carson there a little bit. But yeah. So I mean, Jerry, it's interesting to me. Listen again. I am glad Bill Maher said this. I am not idolizing Bill.
Listen, let me give a little context to Andrew's equivocating is the wrong word.
Explanation. Yes,
I have been on a tear. Like what a surprise! Jerry's on a tear.
Well, time out, Jerry. It's not as though you haven't been on a tear on this show. I mean, you've been on a tear on this issue on this show. But go ahead.
But for the longest time, I've always
you don't like the conservative flavor of the month. I get it.
Yeah. So what happens is, so Joe Rogan does a couple of his podcasts and we like it. So all of a sudden Joe Rogan is the hero. Is the hero.
Yes.
Until he's not, right? Until he does something we don't like. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, Joe Rogan. The same thing with Elon Musk. Yeah. God bless Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. I have nothing against them, but Elon Musk was the hero for free speech until he won't be. And then, and here, Bill Maher, Bill, just because Bill Maher says something that is correct this week doesn't mean next week he might not. It doesn't mean, however, that we shouldn't just highlight the wisdom in what he's saying.
But more when it's not even the wisdom, right? Here's my point in bringing this up, and there's the same reason why I sort of bring it up with when Jon Stewart would do this on occasion, right?
Who, by the way, Jon Stewart, who all the conservatives, my goodness, that guy, I would go to salon dinners, luncheons at the Manhattan Institute, at AEI, and everyone was like, Jon Stewart. Today, Jon Stewart is one of the most ugly progressives, calling out America as racist, as all white Americans as racist, as America is no good. Now, again, just a couple of years ago, he was the latest, love affair with conservatives.
Here is my point. I am offering this up as an illustration of, because Bill Maher's audience, in the same way that Jon Stewart's audience was different, their audiences are not our audiences. And so for Bill Maher to say this, I think is important to sort of point it out, right? Because in the end, that a Trevor Noah, when he's not at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, or Samantha Bee, or Stephen Colbert, right?
Who again, Steve Colbert at one time was a flavor of the month conservative hero because he was profoundly, he said, Catholic and Orthodox.
Yes.
Until he's not. Now he's all up in arms about abortion and Roe v. Wade, and we need abortion rights. What again?
Hold on. Let me ask you a question about this. I'm going to posit something here, and I'm going to say that they may have had these beliefs. Right? Let's take a Tim Kaine, for instance, or a Bill Casey. But do you think that the tribalism and the division in America and their brains being broken by Donald Trump, do you think that had an impact, that this has exacerbated this? And so formerly semi-sane people, or someone who might have had at least a sane position on one or two issues, they have gone completely off the deep end because of the Trump effect? Or do you think that they always held these beliefs and they just lied?
I don't think they were there. I don't think they lied. I think Tim Kaine was at one point an imperfect Christian, but practicing Catholic. Yeah. I think what changed, but at the same time, I don't think that Donald Trump broke their brain either. Okay. What I think this is something even more insidious. And again, you could read, I'm gonna pull some scripture here. You could read it in Romans, you could read it in Revelation. But the fact is that in the end times, and I'm not saying that Jesus is coming back tomorrow,
I'm sorry, I'm not going to laugh dismissively.
But the end times, look, if you're a Christian, the end times have been happening for 2,000 years.
Yes.
The moment that Christ ascended into heaven, we were in the end times.
Sure.
So please don't. I'm not pulling we're all going to be raptured tomorrow moment here. But I am saying this. I'm saying that that these times, I say it that way. These times, it is perfectly understandable why men and women in authority, corporate leaders, senators, Congress people, etc., media would trade in truth for lies.
Well, listen, yes,
and I think Tim Kaine is doing it. I think he's doing it for power and for prestige and for and because he goes to a cocktail circuit and he wants to be patted on the back.
That's
why he's doing it.
The seduction of being wanted. And
Yes.
I'm reminded of two competing quotes here. One is from Wayne's World, right?
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin didn't do tunes that everyone liked. They left that to the Bee Gees. But more to the point, I am reminded of the William Butler Yeats poem, The Second Coming, right?
Right.
Which if you've never read it, William Butler Yeats, great Irish poet, it is literally about the end times.
Right.
And it ends with, "And what rough beast his hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born." But one of the things that he talks about, and I've quoted this quite a bit on my radio show and probably here as well, the line, "The best lack all conviction while the worst are filled with passionate intensity." Surely some hour of reckoning is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. But I will say, I am going to say something snarky, Jerry, just about your point and about the transformation. Tim Kaine, Casey, Colbert, their viewpoints may have changed over time. Joe Biden,
oh my
believes
goodness,
today what he believed 40 years ago.
Yeah, Joe Biden is alive.
Yeah,
and he's an angry partisan. He always has been. I made the mistake. I made a serious error during the 2020 election, and
you made a serious error during the 2016 election too, Jerry.
The mistake I made in 2020, and my brother of all people, my brother Timothy, pointed this out to me in an argument one day, because he had said to me something like, "Well, Jerry, you were the one who said that at least Joe Biden is a good guy. At least he is." And I did say that. I said that on my radio program. I said it, but in retrospect, I said it because I was trying to find some kind of common ground with Democrats. And I would say,
to be fair, Jerry, you didn't want to punch down on this doddering,
right? But the thing is that I was wrong. I should, and I learned from that mistake. I'm not going to speak a half truth because it might put me in good favor with someone else. The fact of the matter, yeah.
So no, go ahead.
No, the fact of the matter is, on this Roe v. Wade abortion issue, there are lots of politicians here in Maryland. Brooke Learman, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, is running for comptroller. And she had, on Mother's Day, she tweeted out a picture of her two young children in front of the Supreme Court protesting for abortion. And then later on, something else about Mother's Day. And I tweeted back at her and I said, okay. I said, Delegate Learman, or whatever her name is, when did your child all of a sudden become worthy of love and respect and protection? Because, just a few years ago, or a couple of 3 years ago, you're advocating to snuff that child out. And I don't, again, the cognitive dissonance, the complete disconnection from reality and truth, when all these pro-abortion people put their kids up and look at my look at my child, look at my newborn, look at my first grader.
It's the hold on for a second, Jerry. It's the meme that's out there about the choices of my daughter and my granddaughter. My daughter and my granddaughter are going to have less freedom today than I do, less freedom in the future than I do now. And I'm like, well, wait a minute.
They would,
you're talking about killing the killing of their progeny here, who won't have any freedom at all. I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, there is the disconnect, and there is the what's the word I'm looking for? It's the objectification isn't the right word, right?
Dehumanization. We've definitely
we've
dehumanized unborn. Look. If I were, and I've said this on this show, and Andrew, I'll say this real quick. If I was in a legislature, I am a pro-lifer without exceptions. I do not believe in the exception for rape and incest. Number one, it's less than 3% of all abortions. And number two, a second violent act doesn't cure a first violent act. And if it's a life, it's a life, it's a life. Sure. But that being said, I'm just being clear in terms of my position.
Of course.
But that being said, if I were in a legislature and a pro-choice, or now they're calling themselves pro-decision, right? Have you seen this?
Yeah.
Choice is out. Now it's all about decision, accessibility, and all the rest of it. But if someone who was pro-choice came to me and said, Jerry,
By the way, that's by the way, that's bad. That's a bad pivot, but go ahead.
Yeah, of course it is. Jerry, let's you and I come up with a piece of legislation that will keep abortion legal and regulated, and a safety net involved there, where those who can't afford it up until X weeks.
Yeah,
and then outside of those X weeks, it will be restricted and even banned. I would say yes to that.
Yeah.
So again, my philosophical, my intellectual, my political, my religious argument with you here is one thing, but I would work toward compromise if I was in the legislature.
That's the way the process is supposed to work, right? This is, and again, getting back to the fundamental point, we talked about this last week on the show, getting back to the thing that Bill Maher was saying, which is this idea of what's going on in Europe and the varying degrees within which Europe approaches this issue,
right?
Which most Americans don't know about, and which, Bill Maher saying this on his show is so vitally important, right? They are crafting different approaches. In America, we will craft different approaches to doing things.
Nowhere, by the way, nowhere.
Sorry, go ahead. Nowhere.
I say nowhere in America will abortion be banned outright. It just won't happen.
Yes, and this is the reality, which is because Elizabeth Warren was out there earlier this week talking about the will of the majority being thwarted by the power of the minority, and it's like your side lost the political minority. I mean, and she's getting into the issues of the Senate and the number of people.
Explain that real quick, because there was a vote.
So there was a vote this week on this codification of Roe. It was defeated 51-49.
That's math.
Yes. In other words, the majority, right? It was brought to a vote, and the majority won. I mean, as they do in a Democratic vote. And Elizabeth Warren then said, well, she then made this stupid statement about the democracy and the will of the majority and all of this. And it gets into the same things that the left has been saying regarding democracy in the Supreme Court, right? In their criticism of this decision. How dare the Supreme Court make a decision regarding Roe v. Wade when the polling numbers say this? And of course, they lie about the polling numbers.
Right.
We don't need to get into this. And in the end, if you have trust in democracy, right? If you are in favor of the democratic process for deciding this, I mean, setting aside the arguments, the pro-life libertarian arguments about the rights of the fetus, the rights of the unborn child, setting aside that, then you should have the courage of your convictions to allow this to go to Democratic votes in the 50 states, right? That's the way it should be approached. And it is, in fact, more democracy, not less democracy. By the way, I say this, I'll probably say this again towards the end of the show. I just literally wrote an essay for the folks at Constituting America, Jerry, about Federalist number 20. And about the comparing and contrasting of the Netherlands Constitution of 1579 and how that informed the Articles of Confederation.
Yes.
Part of this had to do with experiments in democracy and what states could do, and so I'll talk more about this towards the end of the show. But the idea is, once again, it is disingenuousness on the part of the left to go out there and declare that that there's going to be less abortion here, or that less democracy.
Let me say two things. Number one, you're right. The left really is fearful of democracy. Robert George, who's a professor at Princeton, tweeted out this morning, Andrew. I'm learning from you. I check Twitter out now more than I used to. But anyway, regardless, he tweeted out this morning something more or less of the lines that the professors, the media, the political establishment, the political class, the laptop class, they believe that they ought to be ruling over everyone else.
Yeah.
They do not believe that ordinary Americans can decide for themselves what's best for themselves. Number one. Number two, to my pro-life friends who just said, Jerry, how could you compromise on abortion?
I'm glad you're clarifying
But
this.
let me say this: if I were a member of the Congress in the 19th century, and the Northwest Ordinance was in front of me, right? This was to allow this land to be to be free soil, but it allowed certain it allowed also some deference to slaveholding states. I would have voted yes on that because it would have meant the expansion without slavery. It would have meant less slavery. And as a legislator, I would vote on anything that meant less abortions.
Well, listen, I mean, it gets down to, you talk about these choices, the voting for the Declaration of Independence when they removed the passages written by Thomas Jefferson about slavery, or the Constitution, the ratification of the Constitution. I mean, this is the problem, right? Is that you cannot be arguing for a greater democratic process and then be all kinds of pissed off when there are compromises that happen. By the way, wanted to bring this up, talking about the worst takes on this, because I do want to also spend some time in a second, Jerry, talking about protesting in front of the Supreme Court Justice's house and the violations of the law.
Yeah, it's funny. Chuck Schumer said this week that let it happen. They protest outside my house 3-4 times a week. I wish someone would fact check that. Well, are they really protesting outside Schumer's house, marching and chanting and all the rest, shutting down the streets 4 times a week in New York? I doubt that.
By the way,
Brooklyn,
Jerry and I had actually considered briefly doing a show in front of one of the justices' houses, probably Alito's house. With the logistics weren't going to.
Andrew had this beautiful red garb and white hoodie to put on.
Yes, in fact, it was not a Handmaid's Tale garb, but it was a takeoff on Little Red Riding Hood. Actually, kind of like an Imperial Guard costume with a red helmet.
That'll be our next show.
Jerry, it was going to be an Imperial. It was going to be the Imperial Guard from Star Wars robe, but with a stormtrooper helmet on top.
Andrew and Jerry save cosplay.
Yes, that's exactly right. So actually, this actually gets perfectly into our the worst of the hot takes here. This is from the Washington Post. Here. Jerry's like, we have to talk about this, and I agreed. For those of you not saying, so there's some segment of the Washington Post called Launcher, which is, I guess, a segment that focuses on tech policy. And tech policy, gaming, entertainment technology, having absolutely nothing to do with theology, philosophy, the law, the Supreme Court, health, anything. The Launcher tweets out, the Washington Post tweets out from Launcher WP, as Roe v. Wade repeal looms, video game industry stays mostly silent. And there is a picture of a mouse, by the way, which is really weird that they would use a computer mouse, where the mouse cable is shaped like a uterus. And I saw this. My immediate reaction, my snarky immediate reaction, hot take was yes, because as goes the creators of Mario Kart and The Legend of Zelda, so goes the American voter. Which gets into why do I care about these things? I mean, but this is the concept of you will be made to care, isn't it, Jerry?
Of course, and your response was funny. I liked it.
Thank you.
But Andrew Sullivan, a liberal writer, intellectual. Everyone knows Andrew Sullivan. If you don't, go check out his Substack blog. Where was he at? The New Yorker? I forget. For years,
I don't remember. Yeah.
Anyway, but he is someone who again, I would say he's certainly center left. Gay rights and a lot of other kind of liberal causes. He has been on the forefront. He tweeted out that this is evidence that journalism is dead.
Yes, I agree.
That this is propaganda. And then Tom Bevan, who's at the kind of the opposite political spectrum. He's the founder and president, one of the founders and the president of Real Clear Politics, and more or less said the same thing. This isn't journalism. Yeah. And why that's important is because the two authors of this piece weren't commentary journalists. They were reporters.
Yes.
And they actually were creating news, right? Because it wasn't like this was a story. They contacted these companies.
Yes.
And this is an example of propaganda, of advocacy, of two reporters not reporting the news, but trying to make the news themselves.
One of my favorite takes, Mark Ashworth, who's an activist, he follows me and listens to the show. Mark Ashworth retweeted from Launcher WP, as Roe v. Wade repeal looms, the dog surfing instructors industry stays mostly silent.
I mean, again, I like that. I like the humor and the snark.
Yeah.
But again, what is really dangerous here is it's once again news reporters not reporting the news, but literally creating the news. I had a football coach who used to say literally. So every so often when I say it first, I say the way he's like, literally, you have to put your hands on the defender. No, but literally, this is news reporters creating news.
Well, and let me get to this. So one of the authors of it was a guy named Nathan Grayson. I'm sharing this on the screen for those of you who aren't watching. And he tweeted out later on, people are suddenly losing their minds over this piece, LOL, which is like, okay. He's
16. How old is this Nathan Grayson? 16?
I don't know. So let me spell out the rationale behind it. Number one, game companies were extremely vocal following George Floyd's murder. COVID-born anti-Asian hate, etc. Silence here is telling. It suggests broader disingenuousness. And I sat there and I read this sort of breathtaking. And he goes on from here. He goes on for this, and I wrote my reaction. Oh, well, maybe it wasn't here. I essentially said, actually, we can go back to this. It served to confirm my initial impression that your premise was moronic, and I stand by this. That this is, again, as Jerry just said, it is propagandizing. It is advocacy masquerading as journalism. I don't think, no, something. I'm going to say this much. Companies are free to comment on whatever they want to comment on. I think commenting on a Supreme Court leak, especially on an issue that is as nuanced as the abortion debate is, I think there's nothing disingenuous about commenting on one and not commenting on the other. And maybe, just maybe, they realize that computer companies, video game companies getting involved in politics may not be the right thing to do.
But also, again, these are news reporters that are not calling balls and strikes. The assumption, thanks to you, I read the article, and here's the thing: it just makes all the assumptions, takes all of the one side from the pro-choice side as fact.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the questions they asked these companies was, are you going to provide, free transportation for your employees to have abortions? Well, again, the reporter is assuming that abortion is the right choice.
Well, there's that, and all, yes, and also that it is the company's responsibility. Somehow the company is sort of engaged in this. I mean, that is the equivalent to bring it back to the baby formula issue and the issue of feeding your kids and taking care of your kids, as Katie Porter was talking about. That's like suggesting, okay, are you going to provide rides for your employees to drive them to the grocery store? When they want to get formula for their kids. Listen, I want to say this much. I got my puppy here. I want to say this much because I want to circle back to this discussion that we were having about Schumer and what Schumer said, because I think it's important to not gloss over this.
Sure.
On this issue of of protesting at Supreme Court justices' houses, there is a distinct and important difference that has to happen here, and some of it is founded in law that is based on this difference, right? In the same vein, we had this conversation with Carrie Severino last week. The Supreme Court process for reaching a decision has to be one of deliberation and discussion and debate, and the justices have to be open and honest and transparent with one another in terms of their discussions. And we want them to do this in a way that is outside of the public eye and free from the pressures of politics, right? That's the whole nature of this branch of government.
Right.
Again, the conversation we had with Ilya Shapiro very early on in this podcast's life, talking about, making sure that the Supreme Court was free from the pressures of politics. That way they reach the best, most thoughtful decisions that are based in law and based in substance. So because of that, because that branch of government, the judicial branch of government, is wholly different than the legislative branch of government, which is founded in the political process, which is founded in political advocacy. and where a legislator is supposed to be hearing from his or her constituents on a regular basis, right? We treat the different branches differently, right? There's a difference in how,
which is why there's a federal statute that prohibits protesting in front of the homes of judges and juries.
Yes.
If the purpose of that protest is to sway them on a case.
Well, and more to the point, right? And this is different than people protesting out in front of the Supreme Court. People have a right to protest out in front of government buildings because it falls under that First Amendment principle. But when you are bringing direct pressure to bear on a judge on a particular case, right? It is no different protesting in front of the judge's house and threatening them in that way and bullying them in that way than if you were writing threatening letters or in, trying to contact them directly or
you were in the, or if you were in the courtroom itself.
Yes.
And you had an outburst that would somehow sway the jury one way or the other.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
in fact, you're right, Jerry. It is essentially an offshoot of the concept of contempt of court.
Yes. And I tell you what bothers me.
Tell you what, wait, but before you get to telling us what bothers you, I think it's important that we maintain some structure here. Let's go to the bottom line.
The bottom line.
So, Jerry, tell me what bothers you.
Well, lots of things, obviously. But what bothers me here is that the governors of Virginia and Maryland haven't done more to protect the families of these Supreme Court justices.
Well, I mean, I think Glenn Youngkin took the first steps to declare that he was going to be doing this. Larry Hogan, as expected, was late to the game. But yes, you're right in terms of this idea of responding quickly and getting cordons up and making it really clear that we're not going to allow this because it is in fact in violation of federal law. But more to the point, Jerry, because it is in violation of federal law, the silence on the part of
the administration,
administration has been deafening here.
There have been surprisingly a couple of Democrats who have publicly said stop. Yeah. Dick Durbin, who I criticized, Senator Durbin, who I've criticized, rightly
Jerry,
said,
don't hold Dick Durbin up as a hero. Go ahead.
But my point is
Dick
that
Durbin, go ahead. Yes.
This again, there are areas where right and left should agree.
Yes.
And this is one. And this is one area where if Joe Biden had said, look, go down to the Supreme Court, have your voice heard. We hear you. Keep protesting. March the streets. Go and protest, but stay away from these homes.
Yes.
Stay away. Well, the American people would have interpreted that, would have seen that as leadership.
100%. And more to the point, leadership from a gentleman who promised us leadership in this way, right? This is why he was elected. And instead we get from his administration, if you can't find baby formula, go to your doctor. Go to your doctor. Which
by the way, Jen Psaki, it depends upon who writes the history books, but she will. I love the New York Post yesterday. The most condescending White House spokesperson in the history of White House spokespersons.
I agree. Something because I brought it up, I want to play this. Here is Jen Psaki.
Since you said it was a public health question, which agency should that question be directed to? Just the very practical, immediate question of if you can't find formula and you need it for your baby to eat, what should they be doing?
We would certainly encourage any parent who has concerns about their child's health or well-being to call their doctor or pediatrician.
God. Horrible. I mean, really. To which
again, that's a question she should have been prepared for, and maybe even have someone from the FDA in the press briefing room with her.
100% right. I mean, the White House did an event on this finally that was closed to the press. I mean, that's which is astounding here, right? I mean, great. You do an event, you have it. I mean, and then what comes out of it, right? There's no task force.
Well,
there's no, we have the White House, and the administration creating a ministry of truth over at the Department of Homeland Security, where we've got, depending on who you talk to, Dolores Umbridge or Mary Poppins running this ministry of truth over there.
I love it.
And yet, they can't put together some kind of a task force on this. God forbid, right? I say this, and God forbid, over the weekend.
Well, because
Joe Biden's going to announce that Kamala Harris is in charge of getting baby formula going again.
But I hear what you're saying. The idea of a task force is what you do in DC, the kind of do nothing task force.
Well, no.
But this is, you don't need a task force.
I don't mean to do nothing.
You have a whole government agency that this is their business.
No, but my point is,
why a task force?
Along the lines of what they did with Operation Warp Speed, right? You put together,
but in this instance, you don't even need that. Open up the plant.
Sure. Yes.
There you go. The Jerry Rogers task force.
Time out for a second.
Open the plant.
Wait, time out, because we are serious guys, and we got to focus on policy in a serious way. We know that even if the Abbott plant were opened up today, right? If they said open it up today, it'll take them 10 weeks to fill the need for baby formula. So that's 2 months. So what do we do over the course of the next 2 months? So just maybe we don't stockpile baby formula for illegal migrants coming across the border. Maybe we take some of that.
Or maybe all those women.
I don't where you're going.
I would say, all those women who aborted their children, give to the common good here.
I'm shaking my head here. Listen, this is like the Bob Saget line.
No, but I'm sorry. I tell a joke.
Said I read that men can breastfeed, but you have to tape cans of evaporated milk to your chest.
Look. My inappropriate joke is to make this point, and that is, we have a real crisis in terms of feeding children, and instead of being focused on that crisis, to your point, a task force. Instead of being focused on that crisis, instead, this administration is 100% focused on how to advance abortion on demand, taxpayer funded abortion on demand in this country. Maybe this is consistency. Maybe the fact that they don't care about born babies is consistent with their they're not caring about unborn babies.
How to use last week's crisis and then this week's crisis to advance their agenda and consolidate power and sort of get things done that they need to get done.
To your point, you mentioned.
Time out for a second, because getting into the motivation and getting into the insane theory advanced by Nina Totenberg, who is, one of the preeminent Supreme Court reporters, that the leak of this draft decision came from a conservative justice. You can see why the draft was leaked in terms of how both sides have responded to it, right? What was the immediate reaction of the left was to use the leak of the draft to attempt, I'm going to use a phrase, and it's indelicate here, to use to do a Hail Mary on the abortion issue and try to pass comprehensive, on-demand, taxpayer-funded abortion legislation.
A couple of things. Number one, to your previous point about the administration holding an event on the formula issue, but not opening to the
behind
press.
Closed doors. Yes.
Right. Now, this is a very real concern. This president in this week shows it. He is not within his right mind.
Yeah.
I mean, he was screaming at one point about food lines. He was getting names wrong.
Oh, states wrong.
I mean, a senator from Wisconsin. He's not. Yeah. He's from Florida. From Florida or governor, whatever.
Rick Scott, senator from Florida. He said he was from Wisconsin. Yeah.
Right. So my point is that there's a reason why you don't let this guy out in public any longer.
Yeah.
But then to your point about the Hail Mary, this legislation. Number one, this is the second time they voted on this with the same outcome.
Yeah.
So Chuck Schumer knew going in that he was going to lose, and contrary to what Senator Elizabeth Warren says, the majority 51 voted no. So but here's the thing, and again I'll say this about Democrats. You and I have always talked about how a vibrant, intellectually honest left of center, liberal Democratic Party is needed. You have to have an exchange of ideas. You have to have these arguments, these compromises. But this is the problem with Chuck Schumer, and maybe why the Tim Kaines and the Caseys and others have just gone 100% into the deep end. And that is that they don't get outside their own bubbles.
Yes.
You know that old line about how I don't understand how Reagan won. No one I knew voted for him. That the Democrats are in this situation. And let me say this very seriously,
please.
You and I, like most of our listeners, work in the real world.
Yes.
So we engage people who are more liberal than us, more conservative than us. We meet all kinds of people, and we have to tolerate and appreciate their worldviews. We have to work with them. We have to make compromises on a daily basis. The Joe Bidens, the Nina Totenberg, and these types, they never leave their bubble. And so therefore, it makes perfect sense that the NPR reporter would think that this was a conservative, because everyone in her bubble, they're saying this. Yeah. It would make sense that Chuck Schumer would think, let's bring it up for a vote again, because everyone in his circle wants him to do it. The worst thing for Democrats was this vote on codification of Roe, because it puts every single Democrat on record with their position on abortion. No Democrat can now say, no. I think abortion should be rare, but legal. No, not if you voted for this. And this is the problem. The Democratic Party, being pushed by essentially the AOCs of the world, is increasingly becoming so extreme that moderates are. We'll see what happens in 2022. Yeah, but moderates are going to have to. Independents are going to abandon the party.
Let me, Jerry, because you brought up the president and his cognitive abilities, I want to play this for you, and I want you to tell me what word President Biden is using.
Exponentially. 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 Exponential. Exponentially.
All right. I don't think I played quite a bit of that. Exponentially, Jerry. Is he talking about exponentially, or is he talking about expediency? Something that is expedited, or has he created a
Are you saying that word is not a word?
Yes, it's cromulent. It's a cromulent word. He is embiggening himself with this word. The Simpsons fans will understand that. Exponentially. I do not think that word means what you think it means. But it listen, Joe Biden inventing whole new languages there.
At least he's saying it coherently.
Well, yes. I mean, well, when I bet they pulled those things out. Hey, listen, I wanted to talk about this. I want to shift gears here. I did want to talk about this. So op-ed appeared in the Washington Post this week. The Washington Post from Washington, D.C., named for George Washington. This was an op-ed by a senior at George Washington University. Local opinions, somebody named Caleb Francois. George Washington University needs a new name. And I don't know if you had a chance to read it. I read the excerpts that were quoted in other, because I wasn't going to give the Washington Post any page views. But we really are, we really are an unserious people, Jerry. Listen, coming on the heels with the Washington Post of their advocacy reporting on the life issue with regards to the video game industry, there is obviously a fundamental disconnect between the Washington Post printing this and then not changing their name. Wanted to get your thoughts here.
Well, I mean, look, that's the obvious, right? Let's rename Washington George Washington University and ask for that. Insist on that renaming in the newspaper, also named for George Washington, in a city named for George Washington. But that's not the problem with the piece. The problem with the piece is that a good amount of smart, intelligent, learned, lettered Americans believe this.
Yes,
they believe that America's founding is founded on racism and slavery. The 1619 Project, which is fantasy, It's fiction. It's not real history. Left of center historians have argued this, that it is not real history.
Yes.
It is fictionalized fantasy history. But the 1619 project,
it is exponentially wrong, Jerry.
The 1619 project has now mainstreamed this idea that the founding of America is racist.
Yes.
Now, again, I just want to make something very clear here. You already mentioned this, that Thomas Jefferson had authored lines about slavery
for the Declaration of Independence
in the Declaration.
Yeah.
And because we needed a united front against the King George, they were taken out by Southern states.
Yes.
But here's something we never talk about. The Constitution itself began the process of ending slavery,
yes.
not just because of its meaning and the idea of rights, and that our rights come from nature or God's nature. But remember, the Constitution outlawed the international trade,
yes,
slave trade. That was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And also the idea, we always go to these, the 3/5, this 3/5. Well, blacks, African Americans, those of African ancestry were only 3/5.
Yes.
Go back, and I've done a little research here. I watched recently a documentary on the Civil War.
Oh yeah.
And they go back, and a lot of the northern states agreed to the 3/5 because it was a way for them to mock the southern states.
Yes.
It was so, yeah, 3/5. It was a mocking. It also, the fact that 3/5 was included in the Constitution, again, was laying the foundation for the end of slavery.
Yes. That's the important point.
Right. America was not founded on slavery. In fact, America was founded on the undoing of slavery. Also, yes. Jefferson lamented in the 1770s on how British slavery, the UK system of slavery, was imposed upon the colonies.
There's a certain degree of irony, Jerry, because today marks the 415th anniversary of the landing at Jamestown. And it wasn't until years later, right? We had the indentured servant process, but later the Britain sort of imposed the concept of lifelong slavery on the colonies.
Right. And so, again, my point in saying all of this is that George Washington, again, should be studied and dissected and judged. But at the end of the day, he comes out hero.
Yes.
And the fact that you want to start renaming, and remember, just 5, 6, 7 years ago, we were promised by these same people, the left, that no, we would never go after the founders.
Sure.
And again, this is just proof that it's America's unique experiment is what they want to destroy.
Listen, I'm going to say this because I agree 100% with everything you've said, Jerry. Here, I'm going to take a slightly different tack in all of this, which is to say, if you are thinking about attending an institution and you disagree with aspects of that institution's history, you don't like that institution's name, you don't like their sports mascot, and I know that sounds petty, but people do protest these things. If you have a problem with those things, maybe, just maybe, you should think twice about attending that institution. And maybe you go to an institution whose history and outlook you support and embrace. But I think there is something highly disingenuous of someone who goes to an entity like George Washington University and essentially says that the entire system of that university is rotten from top to bottom. I have a problem with that.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. And remember, though, George Washington University brought this on themselves.
Yes,
they have had university-sponsored days of rage and safe places, and George Washington University itself has called into question the founders and the founding of the United States.
Listen, all I know is, right, going to the second oldest college in the United States. My alma mater, William & Mary. William & Mary had a lot to grapple with. William & Mary has a lot to grapple with by virtue of being a Virginia school, They've got a new sort of monument to folks who were enslaved and either owned by people affiliated with the college or owned by the college itself.
Can I ask you a question though, as you talk about your school, because I know where you're going with this, but I want to ask this question. In 1690, in 1710, in 1810, in 1890, where was, or 1,000 years ago, or today, show me the country, the nation, the people group, the tribe. Show me the religion. Show me the philosophy that did not have slavery.
Well, more to the point, not even that, Jerry. Show me an institution that has existed for more than, I'm even going to say in America of 2022, that has existed for more than a decade, where you're not going to have some concern or question with some perspective that institution has taken over the years. Right. I mean, this is just the way it is. We do not believe, we believe certain things in the same way that we did 400 years ago, 300 years ago, et cetera. There are other things that we did not. But I wanted to contrast this, right? Because William and Mary has gone through a naming. And I'm going to say this, in terms of grappling with their history. One of William and Mary's most famous historic figures is someone named Benjamin Stoddert Ewell, who was president of the college, I think, just before and then after the Civil War, and was responsible for keeping the college alive. As it happened, and so the college, and rightly so, has revered him for doing those things. As it happens, Benjamin Stoddert Ewell was also, I believe, a major in the Confederate Army. His brother was a general in the Confederate Army. Benjamin Stoddert Ewell was responsible for organizing the defense of Williamsburg. And I say this because last weekend was the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Williamsburg. So how does William and Mary reconcile these things? They're going to, and I hope they're not going to throw out the legacy of Benjamin Stoddert Ewell. By the same token, William and Mary had a building on campus named for a gentleman named Morton, who was a professor. It was for a long time, it was the building where the government department and the international relations department were housed until they moved. He was someone who was, I'm going to say he was a racist. I believe he was a eugenicist. He was someone who I think held extreme views even in the time in which he was alive. Renaming that building, I have no problem with. But again, these are conversations that you have. You don't go to George Washington University if you hate George Washington. I mean, it makes no sense to me. Anyway,
just to kind of bring it full circle with our conversation today. The science of when human life begins is settled. And I know that I hate that term, settled science, so maybe I'll backtrack.
No, I wouldn't call it settled science.
The idea that there's a unique DNA genetic code, human, at fertilization, we know this to be true. We know that at fertilization, how tall you will be, the color of your eyes, your fingerprints, all of these genetic markers are already set. At fertilization, the science tells us that you are a unique being. Now, you want to have conversations about development and personhood. We can have those conversations. I know where I stand. But the science is clear. So someday, are we going to have to rename college auditoriums or take down statues in the Capitol Rotunda because, oh my goodness, can you believe that 100 years ago abortion was allowed?
Yes. Yeah.
They allowed for the wanton destruction of unborn human life. And my point is that be careful. And even still with William and Mary and with Georgetown. Well, Georgetown, we talk about them too. Yeah. Their colors, blue and gray. Gray of the Civil War, blue of the Union. But George Washington University. How many of those students or faculty members who are saying rename this school because George Washington owned slaves are themselves supporters of abortion rights?
That's right. And again, yes, because things change and our perceptions of things change. And You're absolutely correct, right? We have these discussions. The science continues to evolve. Well, we've said this, let's take it out of the abortion realm for a moment, right? Let's assume for a moment that we all were to agree today that, climate change is real, that it is a problem, that it is a catastrophic problem, that it is a crisis problem, and that it is man-made. Even if we agreed on all of those things, right? And we said the science is settled on these things.
Right.
It then becomes the political and policy discussion to have as to what we do about it and how we go about it. So the science is evolving and has continued to evolve when it comes to life and when it comes to birth, when it comes to the gestation, and how we sort of view this from a policy and political perspective.
You just made a brilliant point.
Thank you.
And let me just unpack it for the listener.
Let you bask in my brilliance. Yes.
No, because listen, if we are to judge the climate change issue years out from now and how we have this policy discussion, once we understood better the science, or the abortion issue, or any number of issues, GMOs, nuclear power, you name it, right? Yeah. There's all of these issues that we're still grappling with. We shouldn't put them in the category of religiosity, and so it's dogma. We should be having 100%. These conversations. But to your point, for the George Washingtons and the Thomas Jeffersons, and for our founding, let's judge them on how they grappled with the issue of slavery. And my goodness, they come out on top.
Yes.
Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Rush, John Witherspoon, down the line. When it comes to the issue of slavery, America figured it out because of, not in spite of, Jefferson and Washington and Madison and the rest.
Got it. Agreed wholeheartedly. With that in mind, by the way, because we gotta close this out. I have this essay that's going to be appearing on Constituting America's website, talking about the founding, talking about the Federalist number 20.
You know what? This sounds like something that should go up on Real Clear Books and Culture.
You know something? I will send it. I will send you the link when it goes up.
Yeah.
It is. It's actually. I think I'm actually really proud of this, Jerry. It's one of the best. It's one of the best essays I've written for Constituting America. Because I needed to do a lot more research onto this one, because I didn't know really anything about the 1579 Netherlands Constitution. But then also reading about an expert on federalism named William Riker, who was a professor, I believe, at Rochester, who wrote a series of works on federalism. So it talks about those things. Go and check that out. I am doing Squared Off this week. So go and check that out as well. Jerry, you are on Sunday.
On Sunday, it's the Jerry Rogers Show on WBAL. Listen in, because I'll be saying what everyone else is afraid to say.
There you go. And Jerry, what do you want people to do?
Find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm. God bless.
Yes. Have a great week, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.